Hey, everybody. Well, this is Gary Randall, and welcome back to another edition of AB&R and the Connected Supply Chain. Today, we are talking about protecting employee health while opening businesses. So we've all been living through some real challenges with the pandemic. We are excited to be able to bring on the event today Mr. Kent Landry. He's a director of location solutions sales for North America for Zebra, and to talk about Zebra's offering with proximity solutions. Kent's an old friend of AB&R, and we're talking to him live from beautiful Austin, Texas. How you doing, Kent?
Hey, Gary, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me today.
Of course. Thanks for joining in. Appreciate it. So, as I mentioned, protecting employee health while opening a business is crucial, right? And we realize that, employees carry a significant responsibility in reopening their businesses. And so, as we started discussing this solution internally to talk about, there's a lot of customers that want to learn how can they get back to business and how can they do that safely and be able to keep their business open and keep their employees safe. And so as we started thinking to it, it was just a natural that, Zebra's solution for proximity came up. And as I started walking through this, I know that you were instrumental in designing that solution. So I was wondering, if you could take a little time to explain what drove Zebra or what drove you to help create this solution.
Yeah, sure. We'll do. Be glad to. And thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time today. So really what drove Zebra to create the solution was born out of our own necessity, right? As you know, we run our own warehouses and manufacturing places of business throughout the world. And as the virus started to spread, we were negatively impacted by that, Gary. Believe it or not, to the extent that we had an outbreak at one of our facilities here in the States. And, we employ hundreds of people on multiple shifts. And at the time when the outbreak occurred, the CDC and those recommendations were fairly new, didn't really know all of the details that we know today about quarantine and containment and how it's spread and 6 foot, 2 meter distancing. Those things were just emerging. And so our supply chain leadership kind of reached out to us as a group in locationing and said, hey, is there anything we can do for our own employees that would help, mitigate some of these risks? And so literally we took it upon ourselves to say, well, geez, yeah, I think there is a couple of options, considering that one of our employees wears a Zebra device and then would use that device as part of the technology platform to enable this solution. So yeah, that was kind of the genesis of this whole thing. And believe it or not, just out of the necessity, it born very quickly from spreading to our warehouses here in the US and to over in Europe and Asia Pacific, et cetera. And the operational leadership, those facilities got wind of this activity that we were doing and said, as soon as you can get that working, we will use it. And so you can imagine we put a lot of our engineers on this, right? I think at one time I had over 100 engineers worldwide working on this project in what we call an agile scrum development process, right? And we were able to really come up with something very effective within a 2-month time frame at the onset of when we were impacted. So yeah, that's how we got started.
Wow, that hits home. That really hits home. So thanks for sharing that with us. And so I think you're kind of hitting a little bit on it, on how Zebra was able to take advantage of their really strong experience they have with mobile devices that are running Bluetooth Low Energy and the years of experience they have with active technology. So could you talk a little bit about how you were able to quickly come to not just terms with what was needed, but actually how do you bring that solution to market?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good 2 questions. One is what was needed. And so, when the developers, we all got together and said, here are the requirements. And then as the CDC and as you started to see the let's get back to work mantra came relevant into the societal fold for employee health and safety, some best practices started to emerge. So we said, look, we know we have the ability to locate individuals through Bluetooth in an active sensing technology where they're carrying a device, right? Or what we would call a device that can beacon, right? So Bluetooth Low Energy has the ability to beacon. And then we said, geez, if we could calculate the distance between one beacon to another and calibrate that within an environment, we could certainly get a lot of information around that, right? Which kind of led to how does it work, right? And how does it actually function? And then the interesting thing about it was it's really a two-step process. It's what do you do to make the devices work for an employee, and think of it as a check-in, check-out, shift work model. How do you sanitize them? Battery life, does it still work with the applications that are running on the device? So there was some complexity in there that we overcame, right? Which was,
Sure.
start, stop. And so we had a couple customers that were active with us on that. And then the second piece was, great, now that I got all this information on a handheld device, people are working 8, 10, 12 hours a day. Where is that data going? So we then had to build a platform to consume that information, which is, if you have a worker shift of 500 people and you think about daily interactions of people and their social behavior in the workplace that hasn't been tuned by social distancing at the time, we had a lot of data coming at us. So we created this cloud platform. Now we call it MotionWorks Proximity. So yeah, so it kind of works in two parts, right? The devices, the Zebra devices running the software, and then sending that information into the cloud for the rules to then help articulate, what kind of events occur and then what to do.
Sure. So that's awesome. So as I think through this, and as we think of a lot of the customers that we work with who may be watching this, as they think through their mobile devices and what they have, a lot of the team members that are out there, a lot of them, they don't all carry mobile devices. So how are you addressing other team members that don't have a Zebra device on them?
Yeah, great question, right? Because we targeted, again, our Zebra owned workers carried a Zebra device, not all of them at one time, but we did determine that we needed to outfit then at that point everybody, right? And I know that can't be cost effective for every single person. So we looked into kind of our portfolio of our healthcare business, and we had a kind of a lightweight, what we call, the product name is an MB6000 device, which was very unique in the marketplace. It looks like a pager form factor, and it had the ability to beacon. It had the ability to receive the Bluetooth beacons. And then the third piece, it had the ability to connect to Wi-Fi, which was our, in most cases, we built this solution to be very light touch, run out of the box. You're not sending anybody on site. So with our mobile devices, same with this device, for those that had a purpose-built or mission-critical use of a handheld device, for those that didn't, front office workers or material handlers and such, we outfitted them with that MB6000, and we were able to cover those individuals, fairly completely, right? I wouldn't say everybody at this point was exposed to the same risks of the interaction, but that's been our solution, is to try and use both of those platforms.
Very cool. Very cool. I know there had to be some way to capture the other ones. Now, the other part of this is the amount of data that you're probably capturing has got to be just crazy. So
staggering.
In this time of reporting, and there's all kinds of HIPAA compliance and stuff like that. I mean, how does the reporting work, and like who gets access or who needs to have access to all that data that you're porting over to your portal?
Yeah, great question too. So our next phase after we made the tech work is to then be compliance with HIPAA standards in terms of personal identifiable information, or PII. And in doing so, we determined that because these devices, handheld devices, have the ability to use barcode scanning, that you can associate a device to a human through a barcode scan, and thus essentially abstract the personal information of that human to a barcode scan, and then that information can be shared through our system only as they are the ones that then maintain that that scan barcode, if you will, person's badge, employee ID, whatever it is. You can convert that physical to digital barcode, and that preserve the integrity. And so we created the software then to allow human resources to log in, and work through their personnel system, as well as then we created the operations side of the business, right, to be able to log in to then associate team members when they come on shift, when they come off shift, et cetera. And then the third piece of that is when you put the reports together, right, you were able to have an HR view at a very high level, which was entitled to see all of the employees. And then you had an operational view, which was to see what was occurring in my business. Were people being exposed? Was there too much dwell time, person to person, that was spreading the virus potential? And the need to then do contact trace was more became an operational consideration. Hey, do I have to now sanitize my whole plant or just this area if that was a concern, right?
Gotcha.
Or, right, and this other piece of it, and then how do you notify those individuals without causing I don't want to say a panic, but causing an issue with the rest of the workers that would say, geez, was I negatively impacted by that?
Yeah,
So,
that's what I was trying to picture, the reporting and who sees that, and someone doesn't have a big red light over their head when they are standing next to somebody.
no,
So
that's
we see the value in this, definitely. And as we want to start discussing this with our clients and getting them back to work, Arizona, we're out of Arizona, and we're coming out of this slowly right now and getting back to work. And as we discuss it, I'm not sure if we definitely see the need for this requirement, but I wasn't sure if there are any federal mandates or if there's any compliance requirements that you're seeing that are not requiring this kind of stuff, but maybe that is the right word, right? Is there some federal mandate that we've met some requirements by putting this in place?
Yeah, great question. So we've certainly seen statutorily within certain states a government's requirement to reopen, right? For example, state of Michigan said you need to provide those employers validation that they can do proper CDC standards in terms of take a temperature, make sure you have some type of contact tracing device and reporting mechanism, right? So you can check the boxes with this solution in that manner, right? So we have seen that. Federally, what we've done is really been able to design it against the CDC standards for that 2 meter, 6 foot radius. So we can alert those or create an event, right? And what we define as event is if, people are together, not just passing by, but for a certain fixed period of time. I mentioned the word dwell, for 2 to 3 minutes talking, that could be an event. And so then that information is reported. But what was most important about that is a lot of our as you said, fiduciary responsibilities for those companies that could assure their workers that, yes, when you come back in, and you heard a lot about the meat packaging industry, the food handling industry, right? The e-commerce supply chain industry, which was all big for us, that we could come in and say, look, if you use this device, you not only have the level of precision that I described, who was exposed to what, at what point in time, and for how long, and then you have that contact tracing tree that said, what was the primary, secondary, and tertiary levels and beyond that those individuals may have come in contact with others. And so by providing that level of reporting, maintaining PII compliance for HIPAA standards, and then giving the overall capabilities to represent that as an additional safety standard, we believe have met most of those requirements that both federal and state have articulated.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So you gave a great example of how this thing was given birth because you needed it for your facility, get that up and running, right? So it was a real life scenario. Do you have any other, now that it's been out for a little while, do you have some stories about people you've been able to get back to work sooner just because of the solution was available, or any good stories?
Yeah, we're moving. Yes. And that's a great question, right? So it's amazing how it's just a plethora of virus has spread the birth of these type of health and safety standards, right? And so what we've seen is, I can cite a couple of statistics, right? For example, people who utilize this technology sees, better than 50% reduction in contact alert events, right? Meaning that, they're aware now that they're within this 6 foot proximity of another human for a period of time that the CDC deems is excessive. Therefore, it creates a noise or vibrates, and people tend to move apart. So we've heard that from customers. That's, in ourselves, we've experienced that change in kind of how the workflow interaction occurs, right?
Sure.
We've also seen that, for those people, and unfortunately there are still cases that are occurring out there where before, these companies would report to us how many minutes it would take to conduct a survey, to figure out who was with whom, how they would have to pull that individual off the line. Was there an operational consideration to shut the whole plant down versus just one site where that occurred? And we've seen that a significant improvement, right? So reducing the number of hours it takes to track that down, to make a decision, to get that decision ratified by the management, and then to continue to keep that business open because, it maybe only happened in the break room and didn't happen on the shop floor. So those events and those statistics seem to weigh out the return on investment that these customers are looking for.
Sure, sure. Well, that's really exciting, and everybody understands the benefit, and everybody knows how important it is for protecting, employee health and getting everybody back to normal. So thank you so much for taking some time to explain the Zebra proximity offering. And our plan is the next edition would be getting some real live video and showing some examples of some of the equipment and some of the kiosks for enabling people and giving people a little more depth in how it actually works. So I can't thank you enough for taking some time and explaining this. And I'm looking forward to sharing this with the rest of our team and everybody who's watching this.
Yep, agreed. Thank you, Gary, and we'll certainly support whatever initiatives we can do with you. Thanks very much.
All right, thank you so much. All right, everybody, thanks again for joining us for AB&R and the Connected Supply Chain, and looking forward to seeing you on our next edition.